I start to put tension on my string to draw back. I was like, okay, I'm gonna smoke.
It's him. You can look at the horns when he's dead. I'm in the zone. Let the arrow go, just perfect.
When they lose their front shoulders and you start, that's how you know there's smoke.
Went about 5-10 more yards. He probably went 20 yards total, tipped over, tried getting back up, and I saw him fall over.
We rough scored him here in the garage that night. We got like 156 and something like that, and then the next day we came up to 163 even.
You're listening to the White Cat Outdoors podcast, bringing you to the table while we talk about the outdoors.
Before I even say one word about the episode
it's like
this week. What?
It's like 7 words.
I said before I say one word about the episode, I'm going to thank you guys for making the merch big hit. You know, we just launched it last week, told you guys about it in the previous podcast. Hasn't been out too long, and you guys have been killing it, buying stuff left and right. So we really, really appreciate the support on the merch. Hope you guys are loving it. If you guys have any issues, please let us know so we can try to get it resolved for you. So far, no one has had any, but if you do, let us know. And yeah, thanks so much for buying it. Yeah, we really appreciate it.
Yeah, can't thank you guys enough. It's been pretty awesome. So, episode 57 today. That's 57 or 56 podcasts you've already tuned into. And if you've been following along since the beginning, probably a pretty good chance that you guys all killed your target bucks this year. So congratulations on that.
Absolutely.
But hunting season's over, and we're back to phase 1, or square one, of deer season. Season's over, and it's time to plan for the next year. Your target buck's dead, and it's time to find a new buck to target this year.
I already found mine.
Really?
Yeah.
Congratulations, Tommy. You're ahead of the ball, and that's why we got you as a host on this podcast.
Yep.
Ahead of the ball? I think it's ahead of the game.
Yeah, some people are ahead of the game, and if you're really ahead, you're ahead of the ball too.
I think if you're ahead of the game, you're farther ahead of the ball because the ball hasn't even made it to the field yet.
Well, that's for the listeners to decide.
I suppose it is.
Anyways, one of the biggest things you can do to try and locate another buck that you'd like to kill is shed hunting. Shed hunting is a fun thing to pick up between deer season and turkey season, but it also helps you locate bucks that made it through last year's hunting season and maybe pick if you want to pursue that buck.
Mm-hmm. A lot of people find sheds of bucks that they had pictures of. So
it's
the bucks
part of the
around
timeline.
And,
yep.
Yeah, you try to put it together to figure out if he made it.
Yeah, and I've been shed hunting for a few years, and I'm a struggling shed hunter. I put a lot of miles with not a lot of success. So I didn't think it made a whole lot of sense for us to sit around here and just talk amongst ourselves about shed hunting. I figured I'd call in an expert. Our buddy Luke Moyer, he was on the podcast last year from killing his monster buck on his property, but not only does he kill big bucks, he finds a ton of sheds. He'll give us the exact number, but I'm pretty sure he found somewhere around 80 sheds last year.
Yeah, we talked about it on the last podcast, but we didn't really get way into
not shed
hunting tactics. Mm-hmm. It was pretty much all about the big buck that he killed, and we just touched on shed hunting. So we wanted to get him back in and really drive home the point of shed hunting and the benefits of it and how he does it since he is so successful at it.
Yeah, so without further ado, why don't we'll give him a call and we'll get him on here. All right, we got our buddy Luke Moyer on the phone. Welcome back, Luke.
Hey, thanks for having me on, guys.
Yeah, no problem. I know the last time we had you on, we were talking about your big buck you killed in archery season. We touched a little bit on your shed hunting, and I know we were pretty brief, and I know we talked about coming back to it. And as hunting season wraps up, we figured it would be a good time to jump back into shed hunting because I know that season is just around the corner.
Yeah, absolutely. It's coming up quick, and I know a lot of times I'm looking, middle of bow season, I'm looking forward more to shed hunting than I am anything else.
Yeah, you just skip right over rifle season and get right to shed season.
That's it. Yep.
So, roughly about what time of year do you start heading out in the woods for sheds?
So typically when I like to start, the way I do it, I shed hunt a lot of public property too throughout the state and multiple states, but a lot of public, and I'll try to save my private pieces for last. The areas that I'm hunting and stuff like that. I'll try to wait till normally if I start on public, I'll start last week of January, first week of February. Mostly because, some of them are dropping like you hear every year in December. There's sheds dropping, and January rolls along, people are picking them up, you're seeing pictures online, you start getting excited. So more than anything, I like to get out on public last week of January or first week of February, just to kind of stretch the legs, maybe pick up some old ones, the year's previous sheds, look for dead heads, just stuff like that. And every now and then you'll stumble into a couple freshies early. So I normally start then. And then when I do, I'll normally wait until usually the first or second week of March before I start hitting any of my private pieces, and then I'll go straight up into April.
Okay. Yeah, I noticed, there's already guys posting pictures of sheds dropped and stuff, and I always feel like you can almost, like, at least I feel like I could get discouraged by going out too early and not really having much of a yield from doing so.
Right. Going out this early can definitely be misleading. You might get lucky, but don't let the pictures fool you, in my opinion. Here in Pennsylvania anyway, I mean, it's a little bit too early. You might get lucky and stumble into one, but you certainly can count on 80% or 85% of the bucks still holding on to their antlers for now.
So when would you say is like a ballpark of when the majority of the bucks have lost their antlers? Is it like that late February, early March?
I would think third week of February would be a good time to start. If you're just going out and just starting, I think third week of February would be a good time to start.
Because I know I've heard like people seeing bucks with racks on their heads in like St. Patrick's Day, but I don't know if that's just like
I think that's a rarity,
a rare thing that
like rifle season guys have seen bucks that had already shed. So I think it can happen, but I think what Luke's getting at is just like the majority should be dropped by that end of February.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, every year I tend to run into bucks that are still showing up on my camera in late March and April. Normally the little ones, but you can tell their antlers are all sun bleached because they're not rubbing them anymore. They're just carrying them around up top, so they're real white antlers and still hanging on to them somehow. And yeah, it's just most of them are normally dropped by the end of February, beginning of March, but not all of them. Some of them are going to hang on to them for a little extra long. Some of them will even hold on to them until the new antler growth actually pops it off. But that's certainly not as common.
Is that typically a smaller rack that'll do that? Because I've never seen that, but I would think if there's like a lack of weight on top of their heads, they would maybe tend to hold on to them longer, or maybe not drop that second one when the first one drops.
Normally the ones that I see that are still holding on that later spikes are little 3 or 4 pointers. That's about it. I've never seen an actual rack buck hold on to anything past the first or second week of March.
Do you think the severity of the winter has anything to do with how quickly bucks shed their antlers?
I do, to a certain degree, yeah. Like I know I'm located down by the Lehigh Valley, so I have yet to even see. I just pulled cameras the other night, and I was looking at about 15 different buck, and only one buck was missing an antler, and it's because I know he broke it off during archery because he's still got 2 inches of base on there. So they're all still packing, but I'm seeing a lot of guys and a lot of my friends that I'm talking to up north are picking up a number of sheds, and they're sending me pictures of deer that have shed already, and there's it's go time for them. But that's because when we had that early snow, this is my opinion, they got a lot of snow up there. Up in Tioga and Bradford area, there was a lot of snow this year in that one storm, and I definitely think that had an impact on the deer's ability to get to food. And once those deer even start, they get a little bit out of the normal, and any extra energy that they have, they're not going to send it up there anymore. They're just going to be shedding those antlers a little bit earlier.
That makes a lot of sense. Definitely with like that heavy winter that the central part of the state got hit with. We didn't really see it up here in like the northwest region as bad.
Quite a bit of Christmas. We got around 2 feet on Christmas, but
Yeah,
other than
but
that,
I mean,
we
we
have
were-
gone a couple weeks after that.
yeah, we haven't had a whole lot other than, like you said, just the one storm. It's been pretty
Right.
mild.
And
Well,
where,
what I
go ahead.
believe happens when that, when we get big snowstorms and stuff like that, is these deer that aren't used to that, and especially the last few years in Pennsylvania has been really hit or miss with snow at all. But what happens is this time of year, you'll see deer still making scrapes. There's bucks that still have testosterone in their body. But when there's a lack of food and they begin to become stressed over that, the fact that they can't get food, they start getting skinnier, and times are getting a little bit hard, their testosterone drops. And when they stop rubbing on trees and making scrapes and their testosterone goes down, then those antlers will pop right off. It's the same reason that they shed their velvet is because right there at the end of summer, they get a big boost in testosterone, and that's what makes them shed their velvet, and that's also what makes them a lot of times go nocturnal and turn into completely different animals. Just that hormone, and the same thing happens when they get a little bit stressed out. They, big drop in their testosterone, and their antlers are pop right off.
It's funny you bring that up about them stressing and losing their antlers, because Tom and I have talked about this a little bit, because over the past couple years we've known 3 or 4 people that have, like gut shot deer or like haven't had a good hit on them, and they've left them overnight, and the next day they go to get them, and they'll pop the antlers off when they go to drag it out of the woods. And we're like, well, is it because all of them have been in rifle season, so we're like, oh, maybe it's just later for the deer and they're wanting to shed anyway, or if it's the stress of what they're going through after being shot for those 24 hours or whatever that forces them to pop those antlers off, if it's the stress or if it's just the time of year. We've been talking about that quite a bit, so for you to bring up the stress thing kind of makes a connection for me.
Yeah, and I'm not really sure how long it takes for them to develop that little crack around their pedicle. I'm not sure if that happens in a week or if that can happen overnight. So I really don't know as far as that goes. But I definitely, there was a 10-pointer last year that I had on camera. He was a 2-year-old deer, really young, but I mean, beautiful rack for a 2-year-old. And he got wounded during archery. Somebody slocked him right in the shoulder. And there for a while, I didn't think he was going to make it. He really thinned down. He got a big infection sac on the side of his shoulder, and he wasn't looking good. So I was kind of more expecting to find him dead. But we had just gotten into rifle season, and he already shed his antlers. I found his match set because he was wounded. And I firmly believe that's why he shed his antlers early, was because he was wounded, and he was really stressed out about the injury and really just trying to recover. So he had a big drop in testosterone. He wasn't worried about rutting or running around anymore. He was more worried about survival, and that's the reason his antlers popped off.
Have you had any encounters with this buck since rifle season? Are you confident that he made it through and has a full recovery?
Yep. Now this wasn't this past archery season. This was last year, and he came back this year as a 150.
Very nice.
Yep.
So he recovered well.
Yes, he did. I was actually really surprised to see him come back as a typical again, but he did, and he's got his scar. But yeah, he came back a beautiful deer.
Yeah, that is odd, because I've heard a lot of stories where like a deer gets hit by a vehicle or something, or by an arrow, and I've heard that a lot of the times the antler on the opposite side of the injury becomes like super crazy the following year.
Yeah, I've heard that quite a bit too. I've never actually encountered that myself, but I've definitely heard of that happening. Yeah.
So I want to change a little bit here. We're kind of getting a little bit off of the shed talk, but you had mentioned, that you save your own properties that you hunt for later in the year, when most likely all of them have dropped at that point. If you could just take us through a day, start to finish, on what you're doing when you decide you're going to go out shed hunting, say on a Saturday or after work.
Okay. So basically, typically I'll do solo shed hunts every now and then. But typically I have one friend come along with me that's just as much into it as I am, and we kind of like to conquer and divide and hit properties pretty quickly. It doesn't really matter who finds them. We're just happy to have a pile at the end of the day. So what we'll do is, we do a lot of online scouting too. So we'll kind of pick points of where we like to be. Especially one thing I'd like to throw in here is bucks like to be up high, especially later in the year like now. They like to be on high knobs, high rises, and stuff like that, where they can see everything's dead. There's the air is real thin. There's a high visibility window. So they like to be up high where they can, kind of watch out around them a lot more. So typically what we do, like the night before we go and hit a property, we'll go online, we'll go on Onyx, and we'll pick out, in elevation on the topo maps, we'll pick out the highest point on the property. We'll drop a pin there, and any river bottoms, we really like creek and river bottoms, the lower spots too, for any cruising that could have been done, any break-offs, anything like that. You'll find deadheads down there. So we'll do all that. the next morning when we get to wherever we're going, typically we'll make a plan. We never stay together. We always split up, so we'll kind of divide the property into a half and figure out how we're going to do it. But we always make a plan about how we're going to do it, because oftentimes what happens if we don't is, you'll be walking and you'll be like, oh, you'll look to your left and you're like, oh, that looks like a shed over there. So you'll go over there, and instead of going back to the path that you were on, you'll just start to aimlessly wander. And we found that that's hurt us because we'll come back the original way that we were supposed to, and we'll end up picking up antlers where we hadn't walked earlier in the day yet we were supposed to. So I think making a plan and strictly staying on that plan is a pretty important piece of advice to do it successfully. Pick a path, pick your S pattern, whatever pattern you want to walk in, but stick to it. And obviously, if you see an antler or you think you see an antler off to your left or right, when in doubt, check it out. You're obviously going to want to go over and make sure that it is or isn't an antler. But go back to your path, make a plan, and follow that. And then whatever you miss, go back through and you can just kind of intermittently hit that. But when you make a plan and you pick points on a property that you really want to check out, it's really good to do that.
So you're saying that like your high points are some of your favorite spots on like a piece of property to look for sheds?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Typically what I'll do is, a high spot's going to be incorporated with a ridge.
Mm-hmm.
So typically what I'll do is when we're making our plan, I'll kind of just try and drop waypoints going up the side of the ridge or up the face of a ridge, or especially if the ridge has a bench on it. Because benches, normally the top or the second down bench on a big ridge tends to be just, I've had so much luck up on those benches with picking up sheds. I don't know why. The bucks just love it up there. And so I'll do up the side of a ridge, or I'll follow benches up kind of like an S until I get to the top. And normally on the top, I'll usually find antlers and buck beds up there.
So you were talking about dropping waypoints as you're on your way up. Do you drop a waypoint wherever you find a shed?
Like he's talking
Yes,
about before.
I do.
Oh, okay, that too.
Yeah. Do you have you noticed at all that where you drop a waypoint from last year, 2 years ago, do you find sheds basically in the same spot right around that waypoint?
It's pretty wild, but actually, yes. There's one buck in particular that I can tell you about. I have to send a picture over. You guys will like this a lot. Back in, I want to say, what is it? It's 2021 now. So going back to, I think, 2016, we hit this small patch of woods. It's 11 acres, all right? That's all this patch of woods is, surrounded by ag fields. There's a big quarry on the backside. It's a very small patch. But as we're walking through it, I stumbled across this matched set underneath a honeysuckle bush. It was an 8-pointer, and he had a small kicker growing off of his right side base. So, that was cool. We were happy that we found it. We came back the next year, and we found his right side. And it was the same buck, undoubtedly, just bigger. I mean, it was almost to a T exactly the same antler, just bigger proportionally, about 30 yards from where we found the match set the year before in the same 11 acres. So the next year we couldn't hit it just because my buddy that normally goes with me, he had moved out to Utah for work. So come to the following year after that, which would be 3 years after I originally found the match set, he came back for shed season. So we went out and we did all our other properties, and we decided we would go hit this one again. Well, we found his big match set again, as whatever, however old this deer was, we weren't allowed to hunt this, only shed hunt it. But we found the old set. They were a little bit chewed up, but we found the old set from the year we didn't shed hunt it, and then we found the new set from that year again. And all of these sheds are from the same exact deer. Just every year he just got incrementally bigger and bigger and bigger as he got older, but he was dropping them relatively, honestly, within 50 yards of where I found that match set the very first year.
That's pretty incredible.
Which, yeah, it was, it's super special. We like to go back there every year. We know, he's not going to make it forever, but it's fun to go back and think that his sheds are going to be there again,
For sure.
Yeah, you'll definitely know when he's not around anymore.
Yeah.
So,
No, those deer definitely, they certainly like to hang out in the same areas. As long as they're not pressured out of an area, I firmly believe they'll come back to the same area every single year when it comes to be this time.
No, that makes sense. I've heard that as they get older too, their home range gets smaller. So maybe have something to do with why you're finding the sheds in the same locations. But it's a good point to bring up to mark them on your Onyx. And I think they actually have a shed icon, don't they?
Yes. Yep.
So that's pretty unique for that. Beyond just like finding like the elevation on properties, do you I said you said you're going maybe that top 2/3 of the ridge. Like does like the south facing slopes have anything to do with finding sheds, or what other I guess like terrain features, whether it's like ag fields, or like is that more wooded areas that you're going to find them on the high elevation pieces?
So, as far as south-facing slopes go, here in Pennsylvania, like out in South Dakota last year, I did a week's worth of shed hunting out there, and we picked up a lot of sheds on the south-facing slopes. But they face pretty extreme weather every year. Here in Pennsylvania, I'll tell you, I really don't have that much luck on south-facing slopes unless there's benches like I was talking about, which to me seems more like where the deer just likes to hang out as opposed to, the sun shining on the south-facing side.
Gotcha.
Typically what I've noticed is that south-facing slopes and deer really hanging out there this time of year seems to be for more areas like Wisconsin, Minnesota, upstate New York, places where they get a lot more snow and a lot harsher weather. So they really need that sunlight. They're going to want to be where the snow melts the fastest so they can get to the food, and they're going to want to be where they can be the warmest thermally. So I don't really think in Pennsylvania, just the way our winters have been, that our south-facing slopes really matter, just because, they've been pretty mild. Now, maybe the same isn't true for northern Pennsylvania, but down here where I'm at, it just doesn't seem to make a difference for me.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I think with having like the harsher weather, that would make a lot more sense than somewhere that's a little bit more mild.
Right.
Now, with your elevation tactic, is that for wooded areas, or even if you've got big ag fields, do they tend to stay in like the higher sides of the fields, or any part of a field good for shed hunting?
I was referring more to wooded areas, like your typical white oak ridges and stuff like that, especially if you can find yourself getting into cedar patches. I do really good for whatever reason. We have quite a few cedar trees, but they're mostly in bunches, and I typically find a lot of sheds around those cedar trees. I know they love rubbing on them, they love scraping underneath of them, and they definitely just like to be around them for whatever reason they like it. So I do good that. But as far as the elevation, I was referring more to wooded areas. But in fields, I have the most luck. I find sheds out in the middle of fields, right out. I mean, it could be random, but I do a lot better in almost like like CRP around the edges. Maybe where an edge just isn't mowed, like those transition areas, between the hardwood and the field. I tend to do really good there. And if you're talking about fields where you don't have very many woods around, I'll find a lot of them in the stone rows too. They'll just jump over stone rows, walk along stone rows. They don't tend to just aimlessly wander across the field for no reason, So they'll kind of follow where you don't have woods and you just have a lot of blotchy fields. They'll tend to follow those stone rows or those ditches, and you'll find a lot of sheds there.
That makes sense. I mean, very rarely do you see, during hunting season anyway, like a big buck walking out through this center of a huge ag field. It's always, they work the edge in daylight anyway. I mean, nighttime might be a little bit different, but it seems like they spend the majority of their time on the edges rather than out in the middle.
Right. And maybe, that might not be true for cornfields, because, those deer just scatter all over them. But as far as something that's mowed, say your cornfield, the stalks have been mowed, or it's just a dead bean field, then what I was saying would be true. But out in cornfields, it could be a toss-up, really.
What do you use, like binoculars or anything as well while you're shed hunting? I know we typically do, but I didn't know if you found that benefits you or while you're shed hunting at all.
Yes, I do bring binoculars with me, and that's saved me a lot of energy over the years. I mean, you see something 100 yards away that you swear is a tine sticking up, and instead of walking down there, you could just look and be like, no, that's obviously not a shed, energy-wise, but also it kind of, I bring them with me kind of more so to keep myself on my plan, on my trail that I decided I wanted to walk. it kind of prevents me from wandering off. I'll stay on that path, and anything I think, I'll pull up the binos. If I still can't tell, then I'll walk over. But they definitely help me kind of stay narrow-minded and stay the way I was going.
Yeah, that makes sense. I kind of want to jump back for a second when you were talking about like finding sheds like on the edges of fields between like, you know, in like the transition areas, because typically when I used to, and I'm like I said, I'm not a good shed hunter. I've struggled over the years to find a lot of sheds, but like during the season you would find deer in, you know, thick, heavy bedding. So I would always kind of just use that train of thought to think, okay, well, if that's where the deer are hanging out, I'm going to find the sheds in thick, heavy bedding. And it seems like from talking to people, and maybe you'll have some more insight on this, that that's not always the best spot to find sheds, because this time of year they're kind of trying to make their life easier and get out of that thick, heavy shit.
Yeah, that's exactly. I mean, you hit the nail on the head there. Everybody thinks that, you know, going through these grapevine thickets or these briar patches are going to be the best places, because everybody thinks that, you know, something grabbing a hold of the antler will jar it off.
Yeah.
Well, like you said, a deer doesn't want to struggle this time of year. As it is, you know, they're already struggling to find food, stay warm, and, you know, so they don't necessarily want to. A lot of times they're just going to pick the path of least resistance. So it's funny, you'll go on a shed hunt and, you know, you'll crawl through the thick stuff all day, and then on the way back to the truck, be crossing the field, and they're on the edge of the field out in the wide open for no reason, nothing bumped it off, but there's a shed.
Yeah.
And you have to wonder why, but that's why. I mean, you hit it perfect. They just don't like to struggle with that kind of stuff. So, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm sure you can find them in there. But I have crawled through a lot of thickets for very little sheds over the years.
Yeah, that's where I've always thought, you know, I've spent most of my time shed hunting is in that thick shit, and just recently I've kind of come to that train of thought talking to different people that I don't want to say I've been wasting my time, but I definitely could have been using my time more efficiently. It's definitely been a flaw in my thinking that that's where I'm going to find sheds.
Right.
Yeah, and even just the sheds that we found last year, I know one was right in like a cedar thicket, and the one I found with Hank was just on the edge of a small ridge. I mean, it wasn't like a very tall ridge, but it was the highest point in that area I was in.
Right.
You know, like I know for us, like I'm happy with, you know, 1 or 2 sheds in a season. I feel like I've accomplished something, and I know you're quite a bit ahead of that. I mean, I guess on average, I know you're way higher than us, but what's been some of your more productive years since you got more serious with it?
Last year was one of my best, for sure. I think 2018 was a close second. I don't know why. I don't know what the reasoning is for that. But last year I ended up with 84 sheds, and 78 of them being in Pennsylvania, and the rest, one from Iowa and the rest in South Dakota. So last year was a really good year, and 2018 was a very close second to that. I think it was like 72 or 73.
And roughly, like I know you said that the majority of those were PA sheds. Roughly how many were like match sets? If you know that.
I believe I only came up with 3 or 4 match sets last year.
Oh, okay. Now, and then for match sets, are you using just like characteristics of the antlers, or are you basing that off of like trail camera pictures? Like how are you
Or how close you found them together?
Yeah, that too.
How am I matching them up?
Yeah.
So basically, one of the bucks that I matched up last year was on my trail camera. I watched him pretty religiously, hoping that he would make it through, hoping I would find his sheds. And I ended up finding them close to 400 yards apart. But, I mean, you couldn't mistake it. I had them on camera, you know, it was obvious. But typically, their pedicles and the color of their antlers will give it away. I mean, a buck, their pedicles are typically going to be the same size unless you have some kind of freak nasty buck. But you'll also notice that even though you're in the same area, a lot of bucks will have different colored antlers. So you'll pick up one antler and then you'll pick up another, and if the tint is off even just a little bit, it's probably not the match set. If you have a buck that has a pedicle the size of a $50 and then one the size of a quarter, it's not going to be a match set. That's just typically how they are. You know, everything's their antlers might not look the same, but if the color is the same and the pedicles are the same size, you're usually looking at a match.
Okay, because I see a lot of people post on social media and stuff of like, a very generic looking, 4 on one side, 4 on the other, and they're like, it seems like everybody's saying that they're finding several match sets every year, but there's really, some of them, like I said, like the color is totally off. I was just curious how you're going about looking at them and deciding that they are match sets. And obviously a trail cam picture is probably a surefire way, but I guess it makes sense, just the color of the rack, because I could see 3 or 4 bucks in a night, and all of them are going to have a different shade.
Yeah, right.
That makes sense.
Yeah, they definitely only have their own characteristics. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're good. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying that every buck is definitely has its own characteristics of its rack. You might pick up one, and then you might pick up another and think, I think it could be a match set, But if you do pick up that match, you'll be like, boom, that's the match. You'll know it. You'll know it right away. Pretty much, if you have to guess about it, it's probably not a match.
Gotcha.
I got 2 questions for you. One being, do you use trail cams at all to help you out during shed season?
Not too much. I saw a story one time about somebody that was kind of trying to triangulate a buck, and they were able to find his sheds. They knew which way he was accessing this field, and they knew where he was bedding. This is all hearsay and from what I saw from this story. But basically what they did was they hung 3 different cameras to try and triangulate his movements, and they got a picture of him on the first camera with both antlers. They got a picture of him on the second camera with both, and then they got a picture of him on the third with one. So they went back between the second and third camera and picked up his antler, because based on their cameras, he dropped that. I tried it one time. I didn't have any luck with that. It's a lot more difficult, I think, than it comes out to be, But I like to have cameras out and just check periodically to see on my private properties what bucks have dropped, what haven't. And if I'm not seeing any bucks with rack on it, I'm seeing a lot with pedicles or burrs, I'll start going out then. But I don't really use them too much to, try and find a particular set of antlers. But for a timeline, I like to look at it.
Okay.
Like the end of February, I'll check a camera on a private property, and that will kind of tell me if I should wait another week. If half the bucks on camera still have antlers, or even one, I'll wait. I'll wait until I'm not getting anything but little ones with antlers still on.
Yeah, that makes sense. Another question I have for you is, you
Tom
said
still had.
I forgot
Tom
you
said he
had
had
2.
two
My
questions.
bad. Tom,
Well, I
please
got a few.
take it away.
I've heard, I don't know if there's any truth behind this or not. Like, I'm not a seasoned shed hunter, but I've heard a lot of people say after a rain and on like overcast days is a good time to go, because I don't know if there's any truth behind it or not, but when the antlers are wet, they really pop and stick out a lot more against the ground. And I guess, I don't know if it's true or not, but I've also heard the sun can kind of glare your vision and make it harder to find shed. So from what I've heard, after a rain and on overcast is one of the better times to be able to see sheds in the woods. And I just didn't know if you had any input behind that.
Definitely, like 100%. Basically, when you go shed hunting right after the rain or during the rain, which a lot of times we'll go right in the pouring rain, it's essentially like glow in the dark. It's essentially like being pitch black and having glow in the dark antlers out there. That's how much they pop out for you.
Wow.
They stand right out. It's amazing how much of a difference that makes. You can walk past an antler 10 times on a sunny day, but in the rain, bam, it'll smack you right in the face. You can see it out of your peripheral vision from 100 yards away. It helps a lot. Sunny days, typically, and I think it has something to do with too the way everything kind of gets matted down from the rain. Everything lays flat. On those sunny, crisp days, the leaves are kind of curled up. The leaves kind of have a shine to them. Everything glares back at you. Even a smooth branch, everything shines. It's definitely harder to find them on a sunny day. In the rain, they jump right out at you.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. The fact that the leaves are laying flat, because leaves get so fluffy when they're dry and crispy that they could definitely hide a lot of the stuff that you're looking for, and it wouldn't pop as well. They'd blend in a lot easier on dry leaves than wet leaves.
Absolutely. I mean, you think all it takes is like 2 or 3 leaves to blow over a spike shed or a 4-point shed,
Mm-hmm.
and it's gone. You know, it's completely disappeared. So you go on those rainy days, everything's laying real flat, and that white is just going to pop out you like glow in the dark. And even if it's just a little piece of that antler showing, you'll see it. So that definitely is a big, big help.
Is there any truth to, on those sunny days? Because, I mean, like you said, you spent a week in South Dakota shed hunting, and obviously, if you're out there to shed hunt, you're going to hunt, or you're going to look for sheds, whether it's, sunny or raining. Is there any truth to putting the sun to your back while looking for sheds? Like, does that seem to help you when, like, looking in the woods or anything?
Yeah, I should have mentioned that earlier. My bad. When we make our plans, that's normally what we'll try to do. We'll try and figure out how long we think our shed hunt is going to take on this particular property, and try and turn and gauge our paths based on what the sun's going to do. It's definitely critical. You can't walk into the sun and try and find sheds. It's gonna hurt you bad. Definitely keep it to your back is going to help you if you have to go on a bright sunshiny day, which, I mean, the weather is really nice on those days. You want to get outside, even though it makes shed hunting harder, you still want to get out there. But it's definitely, I think it's important to keep it to your back if you want to up your chances of trying to find them. If you're looking into the sun and you got your hat pulled down, I mean, that glare and the haze that it creates, it makes it so much harder.
So on top of, like, I guess, what's the average amount of distance you're going to walk on a day of shed hunting? Like, do you typically hit several properties on one day?
Yeah, well, normally it depends on the size of them, but we normally I don't shed hunt during the week at all because I work full time. So the only sheds I'm getting are on Saturday and Sundays when I'm not working, and you're normally looking at 3 or 4 properties depending on the size of them, and normally 15 to 20 miles a day.
Do you hit properties more than one time throughout the year?
Yes. All the public properties that we do in the beginning of the season that I was telling you about, where I'll go back and look for old ones, I'll go back on a weekend during March and just kind of skim through them. I won't really take the time to make a plan for those ones just because it's the end of the season. I'm kind of wearing down, and I just want to go back through and make sure I didn't miss too much, and I'll go back through and see if any more dropped. I'll just hit those critical areas where I find sheds that I have marked out on Onyx. I'll bounce from there to there to there to there. If there's nothing, then I'll get out of there. If there is, then I'll start to scan a little more carefully.
Do you often pick up sheds? Like, I don't know how to word this. So say you
Second
go in
time around.
I'm saying, yeah. You go in the first time and find a shed in one area. How often do you go back a second time and find sheds in obviously from a different buck in the same area?
Pretty rarely, I'll be honest. Yeah, pretty rarely. Every now and then, but pretty seldom, yeah.
So do you think there's sheds that, like, you missed or that have dropped in? I mean, obviously that would depend on the time of year that you started looking, but do you think that they're ones that you've missed the first time you went through, or they're ones that have dropped since?
I think the ones that I do find are ones that have dropped since. And being that I only hit my private properties once and the public properties twice, I think that there's other shed hunters out there just because it's becoming so popular now. So I try not to get too worried about it. I think other people go through and kind of scoop some up while I'm away. After I hit that, somebody will go back in February when I'm starting to do my privates, and then they'll start picking them up. And, they might miss one or two, and I think those are ones that have fallen since, but just haven't been found yet.
Gotcha. I noticed, too, one of the pictures you sent me over with all your sheds and stuff actually had an elk antler in there as well. Does your tactics for finding elk sheds differ from whitetail? Obviously, your location, but just the difference between finding those versus whitetail.
Yeah, so that one I actually got. I don't shed hunt for elk antlers. I haven't anyway yet, besides out west. But that one was found in Pennsylvania, and we were actually on our way out to Ohio, and we stopped in western Pennsylvania to look for deer sheds. Because there was a piece of public that we happened to be going past, and I'm like, oh man, we ought to jump out of the car real quick and hit that, So we did, and that one just happened to be there. So I can't really say one way or the other, just because I haven't done it. I hear shed hunting for elk sheds out out in western Pennsylvania can be a little crazy. So
Yeah, I've heard people pretty much follow them around until they drop. Like I've heard it's very difficult to find sheds in PA.
I've heard of, a lot of them have bullet holes in them of people trying to shoot them off, people following them. It sounds a little bit crazy. But I know out west, there is no difference in what we do. But you kind of have to follow their migratory patterns, which I'm not too familiar with yet out west. But, obviously where they are during September when they're rutting is going to be very far from where they are in the winter, in their winter ranges. Typically, I think they'll come down off the mountain. They'll come down low for their late season. So normally where we're picking up deer sheds, we'll run into some elk.
Okay. I've heard that, we haven't done actually any elk hunting out west, but they said, as it gets colder, they just keep moving further down the mountain, trying to get away from the frigid temps up at the peaks of the mountains.
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate. You can almost see it, the way the browse from up top, everything that they browse on starts to die off as it gets colder and colder and colder up there. And so I think they just kind of step it down little by little and just kind of follow the lifeline down until they're down in the valleys and down in the river bottoms.
I'm sure that applies for elk and mule deer, or I'm sorry, not elk, but whitetail and mule deer, because they share a lot of the same habitat, and they do the same thing. They have, even though whitetail aren't as migratory and herd animals as elk are, but I'm sure they still do roughly the same thing.
Oh yeah, absolutely, no doubt. So, I know out in South Dakota, we witnessed multiple herds of whitetails, well over 100 deer.
Wow.
Which was pretty phenomenal. That's obviously much different than it is here in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, you don't usually see that in PA.
No, so I mean, when we glass up a good river bottom and we can see 100 deer in a night, we'll come back the next day. They're all up to bed in their ridges, and we'll go out, and it's nothing to pick up 30 or more sheds in 2 hours. I mean, they're just all the deer right there, every night, and they're just dropping. They're all dropping right there. It's a pretty special thing out west for sure.
So you traveled all the way out to South Dakota to shed hunt, and like you said, that it can vary quite a bit, location-wise, where they're at in the late season, where they're shedding versus where they would be at during hunting season. So when you're heading out there to shed hunt, are you doing it for future hunting purposes, or just because you like shed hunting so much?
So when I went out there last year, my trip started in Iowa. I wanted to shed hunt Iowa for multiple years, so I just decided to pull the trigger and go out and do it. So I took a week off work and I went out there, and I talked to multiple landowners. One, I found that they're not too kind to out-of-staters. They're not very fond of us.
Yeah, I've definitely seen that all over the place out west.
Yeah, obtaining private land was very difficult. Although I did see multiple bucks that still had racks on them. And every public land parcel I went to, and every single one, there was boot tracks and dog tracks everywhere. I mean, everywhere. So I spent 2 days there trying to locate standing cornfields way back on these public pieces. One I found I thought for sure was going to be dynamite. I got to the cornfield, and I'm talking, this was probably 2 3/4 miles from where the park was, where I parked. And every single corn row had been walked up and down with dog tracks and boot tracks. So at that point, I'm assuming somebody's got a shed dog out there, and they're really looking for sheds. So that's why I went to South Dakota. Although I knew I was going out there this year, so it kind of worked as I could have turned around and came home and found sheds at home, but I decided, why not? It's 8 more hours to go out to South Dakota and, where I'm going to be hunting, just to shed hunt around there for a couple of days. So that's what I decided to do. But what I noticed, and all those areas that I picked up mule deer sheds last year out there, I went back this year to bow hunt it and did not locate any mule deer in those areas at all, not even one. So I definitely think the migratory aspect of it has a huge role in it. Where you see them in hunting season is not necessarily where you're going to find the sheds if you go back.
So that you're talking out west with that, or Midwest, where there's a lot more terrain and stuff. So
Right.
do you typically see that same sort of behavior? Because we were talking before, like how the lifeline's dropping down where the browse and stuff are dying. Do you typically see that same sort of activity around here in PA where you're finding sheds isn't necessarily where you're going to hunt? Or is it a little bit different because of the geography and the location?
I definitely think it's a little bit different here in Pennsylvania, just because everything kind of seems very crowded. The land parcels are small. There's a lot more agriculture here, and everything's kind of, I don't know, everything seems so close together here. So the deer seem to stay. If they find a spot that they like to be, they'll stay there. Um, Typically, a buck that I'm chasing in archery season, I can go back to the same, whatever it is, 30 or 40 or 50 acres and find his sheds on that piece of land come this time of year. So as long as there's food, I don't think around here they wander too far as long as they're comfortable on that property. Um, Certainly not, and on the spectrum as it is out west.
Yeah, I could definitely understand that.
Do you ever find like sheds from bucks on your private property that you had no idea you ever had? You never got trail cam pics of them, or you never saw them while hunting or anything like that?
Yeah, every year. Every year that ends up happening somehow. Uh, it's always kind of peculiar because I run cameras almost year round, very close to, and it's kind of weird to picture a deer slipping through the cracks, but it happens every year. We find sheds from deer that we had no idea even existed.
Now, are those typically like potential shooters for you, or is it maybe like a younger class deer? Like, I guess what age class is typically slipping through the cracks for you?
I think 2 or 3 times we found sheds that would have been a shooter. One of them being 160 to 170 class deer. I never did score his sheds, but they're monstrous. They're absolutely huge. And I never got one trail camera picture of him. I decided that next year I was going to dedicate to trying to kill him if I could find him. And I never did find him. I have no idea where the deer came from. I mean, he came and went just as fast as I found his sheds. It was like he never even existed. It was very
Shed dropped
strange.
from the sky.
Yeah, it was very strange, and it was a match. I found the match, so it was. I thought
Holy
for sure,
smokes.
that deer is going to be here somewhere, but I never did see him. And, in my opinion, around here anyway, the way we live around here, a deer like that, gets killed the next year, you're going to know about it. If it was killed legally anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've had a run-in with illegal bucks up here this year. We actually, this is totally off topic, but just since you brought it up, they just busted a huge poaching ring up in our neck of the woods. A bunch of actually miners that had been poaching deer and livestock over the last few years finally got busted. I mean, I think a couple of years ago they had killed 2 like cows, just out in the middle of the night, just killing cows or the trophy class deer. We had probably a close to a 150 killed off of our new piece this year by that group. But I mean, it was glad to see it get them taken down, but it's unfortunate at the same time.
Yeah, it definitely is, especially because, they just do it for the fun of it. They just do it for the kill.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, too, here in Pennsylvania, just, you hear about these stories and the consequences just never seem to be hard enough,
Yeah, I
just in my
totally
opinion
agree with
anyway.
that.
It's kind of discouraging. The guys that are trying to do it right normally get the worst consequences. The people that have been doing this kind of stuff, they just usually seem to get a slap on the wrist and off they go to do it again. But
Yeah. So I mean, I know you're no stranger to killing big mature whitetail in PA, and then finding sheds like that. Do you find yourself hiding that kind of information, just from like the locals and stuff, just in fear of poaching or somebody stepping on your toes during hunting season?
Absolutely, yeah. Bow hunting trophy deer around here is very competitive because most of the land parcels are small.
Yeah.
So, I mean, seriously, it's pretty sad. Unfortunately, if I have a piece, I've had buddies that knew I was hunting a piece. I mean, if me and you, Nick, were hunting, if I knew you were hunting a piece, I'm not going to go ask the landowner if I can hunt that,
Oh yeah,
But I've had close friends do that to me and obtain permission on me. And, so that
Yeah, that's
I
shitty.
definitely tend to keep things secretive anymore. Unfortunately, I
Yeah.
don't like to. I want to talk about it. I want to share that kind of excitement with other people, that want you to get that deer. But, I just can't do that too much around here.
Yeah, we're in the same boat here. I know we all, if we have something really remarkable, you pretty much just keep your mouth sealed to. I know, like me, Tom, and Frank sitting here, we're pretty open about what we're after throughout the season. But all three of us, I mean, me and Tom hunt the same parcels, but Frank doesn't really hunt with us. I mean, we're hunting in the same general areas, but we don't hunt the same property, and it's like a mutual respect thing. If you're after a big deer, we're not gonna, go
I'm
ask
not
the
gonna
neighbor
run over to your property
or ask the
Yeah.
neighbor if you can hunt there. I didn't realize you run into that with people down there too, but unfortunately, you have to keep your mouth shut until it's dead.
Yeah, and then once it's dead, people start saying, "Oh yeah, we had that buck on camera." And usually people are pretty cordial about sending trail camera pictures of the stuff they knew was around that they were kind of keeping quiet. Once it's dead, they're more than happy to give away their information after that.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Even I mean the same thing goes with the property. I mean, where me and Brad killed our bucks last year. I mean, out of this piece of land, this tract I was chasing one this year that was pushing 170, biggest buck I've ever hunted. And I mean, this place, there was trucks up and down the dirt road every day, every single morning and every single night, nice and slow. Like word gets out, and then it just turns into that kind of thing. So it becomes really difficult.
Yeah. Did you notice that the pressure picked up after you and Brad killed those bucks in the same season?
Oh, absolutely, yeah, big time.
Yeah, so I mean obviously the genetics are there, but I never totally understood that mentality because like that buck's dead, but clearly if you're chasing another one that size,
Yeah.
But
the neighbors, the neighboring property to us, it's a good group of guys, but they only ever rifle hunted until they found out that we had killed those bucks last year, and which I'm not absolutely not discouraging them at all. They picked up bow hunting. They wanted to get out there earlier once they knew that deer like that were running around, which is their property, and I'm glad to see them getting into bow hunting, but why they did it, they were very excited to see deer like that running around. But I mean, these things don't fall out of the sky. The only way to let these deer get that big is by letting them get that big. So it definitely upped the pressure. Deer were way more stingy this year around here. It was a lot harder to hunt the property smart and safely. It just was. It's just the way it is, and you kind of have to fight with it and hunt it smart. But it makes everything much harder for sure.
Yeah, I know we've learned to kind of keep it very generic when somebody asks, where we killed something, because it seems like it's the first question when a good buck gets killed is people want to know where you shot it. And I know I keep it very general, like pretty much the general town that it was killed in, because it just we all hunt several different pieces and stuff, so nobody could nail down exactly what parcel we're on unless we told them specifically.
Right.
So we've kind of learned to just around here, we live in Erie County, but there's Edinburgh, Cambridge, McCain, Waterford, Union City. We'll just give a generic town that's 27 square miles and kind of leave it at that. Just for that reason.
I actually, that buck that I was telling you about, I saw him. I had an opportunity. Well, I had an encounter with him the Monday after Halloween. After work, I found myself with a little extra time because I went in early to come back and hunt deer down here. We're starting to really chase hard then. And I knew where he was. I knew where he wanted to be. So I got out there, and within 15 minutes of getting in the stand, I had him at 54 yards was the closest he came. And I could have stuck an arrow in him, but it wasn't the way I wanted it to happen.
Yeah,
and
54 yards is a poke.
The arrow to be. And, that would... I wouldn't forgive myself if a deer like that got away. Any deer, for that matter.
Yeah.
But,
I'm sure...
So I didn't shoot, and I thought for sure I'd get the chance that night, and I just never did. And on the same night, I passed a 4-year-old 148 pointer, and which ended up... I can't say it'd be a mistake. I kind of have to play by my own rules. I'm looking for a 5-plus-year-old deer, and the one I was hunting was 6 or 7. I mean, he's just a huge... old, beat-up, scarred-up deer. But, in the process of that, he broke his main beam, this big one that I was hunting. I saw him 2 days later on Wednesday night with his right side broken off right past his G2. So just the other week, well, it was.
Oh, I
I don't
did see
know.
this part of your
Yeah,
story.
two weeks ago, I went down to change the trail camera card, and on my way back out, I saw a deer laying in the thick, dead, and I kind of crouched down to look underneath of it, and I could see the rack, so I crawled up in there to look, and sure enough, there he laid dead. That 148 pointer that I had passed, he laid there dead. He got himself tangled up in a tree while he was rubbing it, and then he actually fell on his own G2 and G3 and impaled himself through the back. Craziest thing I've ever seen for sure.
Yeah, you
But it just goes to show you, it was fresh too. It was no more than a week old. So it just goes to show you that, you pass these deer in hopes that they'll make it. They might make it all the way through archery. They might make it all the way through rifle, but it still doesn't mean they're going to live,
Yeah. But I mean, you're out there hunting your hunt, especially, I mean, when you've got a deer of that caliber and you've got them, pinned down like you do. I don't know if I have the control to pass a 140. I don't think I do. But I've never been in the game with a 170 class whitetail, especially in PA. That's pretty incredible.
Yeah, you definitely don't see them very often in PA.
No.
Well, I can tell you, seeing them both in the same frame at the same time, 170 is a
Well, you saw them at the same time?
They were there at the same time. Yeah.
Whoa.
And
that thing.
So, I mean, that makes it much easier to pass it. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm sure that thing
had
looks
he
dwarfed next to a monster like that.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. And that's why when I found him, I'm like, wow, you were way bigger than I thought you were for a 4-year-old. And then when I scored him, he ended up coming into 140 and 6/8 as just a typical 8-pointer. I was like, ooh.
That's a big
That's
frame.
impressive.
Yeah.
But I did also end up finding about, I don't know, what was that 5 days ago or something like? I'm sure you saw that too.
Yep.
That the broken end of the main beam from the one I was hunting.
Yeah.
It was just an absolutely monstrous buck. I wish pictures did him a little more justice, but I mean, he's pushing 300 pounds and just mass and just an absolutely huge buck.
Well, I was noticing just with that picture you put at just the tip of the beam there, it almost seems like it has the same characteristics of Brad's buck from last year. And I don't know if you guys, maybe with characteristics that you guys obviously have more pictures than any of us have seen, but like, do you think that there's any relation between those bucks?
I definitely do. Yeah, I completely agree with you. So the one that Brad shot, he had a drop time coming off the end of his main beam when he was in velvet as a 5-year-old, and he had a twin, which we didn't know about until our neighbor, who's a state trooper, he kind of spent some of his time on night shift, out there with his light on his car. He just likes to look for deer too.
Some people speed down those back dirt roads. You got to be there.
Yeah, and about a mile and a half away, he saw this deer out in this field, and he's like, wow, it looks a lot like the one, we're chasing just over here on our properties. But the same night, we got a picture of the one that Brad killed, and, you could see minor differences. But as far as, like, age and, rack class, I mean, almost identical deer. It was very, very close to being identical, just very, very minor differences. And I believe that they were twin fawns. That's my opinion on it. I think they were just born twin bucks, And so, as far as most does around here are having 2 fawns every year. So I totally believe that it's possible that he was in relation somewhere with, Brad's buck. I don't know, of course I don't know that for sure, but I agree with you, though. Their characteristics were very, very similar.
Yeah, I mean, even just the few inches that you had on that post, like, to me, my first thought as soon as I saw it was like, wow, that looks a lot like Brad's buck from last year.
Yeah.
So it's neat that you got that kind of genetics, and it sounds like you've definitely got the age structure in that area too, which is probably one of the hardest things to do here in Pennsylvania is get that age structure established because you've got so many traditional meat hunters in the state.
For sure. Yep. And, like I said on the last podcast, there's nothing wrong with that. But once you get that age class kind of thing rolling, it's hard just to even maintain it. It really is. You're passing deer that you didn't think you would pass, like so this year. Really just hoping, just in case these other 2 big ones that I was chasing might happen to die, at least I have him for next year. If he would make it, he would be the 5-year-old that I'm looking for next year.
Yeah, it's a good point.
But it's very hard to maintain. I was looking forward to picking up his sheds. It just didn't work out that way. That's all.
Yeah. Well, Luke, I don't want to keep you too much longer, but wanted to thank you again for jumping on here and talking sheds because, like I said, we enjoy shed hunting, but we're not really that good at it, and definitely not in a position to give pointers. That's kind of why I wanted to bring you back on.
Yeah, and I feel like most people that go out shed hunting are more like us. They just kind of wander aimlessly. So to talk to someone like you that actually lays out a plan and looks at maps and goes about it exactly like you're hunting this deer, you're just hunting his sheds, it's a really cool perspective to get.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. You can definitely learn so much about a particular deer too. You find a match set of sheds somewhere, a big deer that you're looking. Well, start wandering around that area. Stop looking for antlers necessarily, and start looking. What is this buck interacting with? Is he browsing right here in this area on certain plants? Is he rubbing on certain trees? What's he doing? If you can find his bed, that's great. Try and figure out, learn a little bit about him. And then, use that knowledge in the following season and see if it works out for you. Go back and just try and see if he's coming into that area. Hang cameras and, it can definitely work out to your advantage, no doubt, for both picking up his sheds and hunting that deer potentially if that's what you wanted to do.
Good deal. Before I let you go, do you want to go ahead and plug your Instagram and your YouTube channel? I don't know if you're working on any films to release here soon, but if you want to just go ahead and plug those for people just so they can find you.
Yeah, my YouTube is October's Obsession, and same with my Instagram is October's Obsession, but my personal account is Luke Moyer, period 045. There's definitely going to be shed hunting videos and lots of pictures to come this spring. I'm hoping it's a good one, as good as last year. But before I wanted to go, I did want to say too, as far as set goals for yourself too during shed season, especially fishing season comes up shortly after. You're thinking about turkey season, and if you're shed hunting a lot, you're getting tired. And you might even be getting discouraged if you're not finding as many. So it's important to set goals for yourself. Give yourself something to look forward to. Set yourself up so that, you have something to look forward to that weekend that you're going to go. Or, Saturday's coming up, you're like, I'm not sure if I even want to go. Set something for yourself that will excite you. Go on YouTube. Watch YouTube videos of it. Get yourself pumped up for it. Because really all it takes is 1 second to turn your entire shed hunting day around. You could not find anything all day and then walk up on a 70-inch antler right there any minute, so think about that a lot and just try and hype yourself up, get yourself excited, keep yourself motivated, and you'll pick up more sheds because of that for sure.
All right, thank you, Luke. Appreciate it.
Not a problem. Thanks for having me on, guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, thanks a lot for coming back on, man.
Yeah,
We really
thanks.
appreciate it.
All right,
Absolutely.
We'll talk to you later, buddy.
All right, thank you.
All right, guys, that was Luke Moyer, of course. He said he's the real deal when it comes to shed hunting.
And just hunting in general.
And in general, yeah. That dude's chasing Midwest class whitetail NPA, and it's not that he's just chasing them. He's having encounters. He's getting pictures. He's passing bucks that guys would dream of seeing NPA. So make sure you guys go ahead and give his account a follow. He's got plenty of good content. And as we get ready for shed season, make sure you guys are getting outside.